Um, in this video, I'll be talking about some of the pros and cons or advantages and disadvantages of motivational interviewing and enhancement therapy. And also, I'll be evaluating the role play that I did. Some disadvantages or cons of motivational interviewing is that it only focuses on the motivational aspect. It doesn't really take into account the fact that the client may have some kind of mental disability or mental delay, mentally developmental delay. Um, what if that client can't think analytically on their own? What if they can't? Um, what if they don't have that problem skill? Um, what if they can't solve problems on their own, or what if they can't think analytically? And motivational interviewing pretty much leaves it up to the client, doesn't really take into account clients who are like that. And as I said in the other video, I feel like all people could benefit from it, but I don't know if this type of therapy would be appropriate for people who have that type of disability, psychological issues. Also, it fails to acknowledge the fact that some people's issues um, stem from oppression, a discrimination of any type. And at times, the client may not even realize that that's what their issue is stemming from. And this type of therapy doesn't tap into that. It doesn't allow the therapist or the client to explore that. Maybe your issues are stemming from some type of oppression or social injustice that you don't really have any control over because of other people. And so that's what's causing you to have this ambivalence or negative behavior. Um, and lastly, this approach is a little manipulative. I said in the other video that I feel like it could be both client-centered and directive, and I do still feel that way, although some people do not feel like it's directive, Dr. Barrios. But the reason why I say this is because the client is trained to ask certain questions. The therapist is trained to ask the clients certain questions that could be leading, questions that kind of make the client think a certain way. They're kind of directive with the questions. Although the client is asking them and answering them and they're using their own thoughts with these answers. They're thinking of these answers themselves, but honestly, if the therapist had not asked these questions that exact way that they asked them, the client would have never probably tapped into that. And if they would have, it probably wouldn't have been at that point. And so that's the point of this type of therapy. We're tackling the ambivalent behaviors, and we're doing that by the questions we ask. Because a lot of times the client is not aware that they're being ambivalent. They're not aware that, they're thinking this, but they can't look at themselves and say, I've been thinking that I need to change, but I haven't changed. They're not aware of that. So us being the therapist, we're trained to ask questions so this can be brought to light. Um, some pros and advantages of this type of therapy is, again, I will say that anyone can benefit from getting this type of therapy. Um, if you are mentally capable of problem solving skills. Um, I think it could even work on children to a certain extent. It's all about how you ask the questions. Um, but I do feel for the most part, most people can benefit from this. It doesn't matter what their situation is, what their struggle is, whether it be eating disorders, substance abuse, um, criminal activity, as we saw in the role play, gang violence, um, health disparities. It doesn't matter. Anyone can be motivated to change a behavior. And once explained to them, or once they can tap into themselves and answer these questions and begin to talk, they may realize that, hey, I am showing some ambivalent behaviors. We've all done that at some point in our lives. So that's an advantage to this therapy, I think. Um, Now, going on to my role play. I was nervous during my role play. I'm not sure why, but I was a little nervous. And as I watched it, I noticed that I smiled a lot. And I think it was like a nervous smile, but at the same time, I think I overly tried to show empathy. I wanted to be relatable to the client. And sometimes smiling at the wrong time can be offsetting. And I didn't realize I was doing it until I looked at the video. So that's something I probably should work on, how my face looks, and I'm trying not to smile as much during an interview. Also, I think I should have reassured the client more. I got kind of caught up in the questions, asking the questions, and it could have been because in my mind I'm thinking, I'm running out of time. I'm gonna have to go ahead and, you know, do this interview. But I did get kind of caught up on that. But I guess I should have been reassured the client a little more. If I could go back, I would have done that. And also, I kind of feel like I ended abruptly. But again, I was probably thinking about the time, didn't want to go over. Um, but, maybe going to that transition of ending a little smoothly. As far as pros to my interview, I think that I did good by using several interventions. I used the double-sided reflection, the clarifying free choice, and also the ruler assessment. During my interview, I didn't realize I was using it until I went back and I said, you know what, I used those. So I was very proud of myself for tapping into that and using those interventions, and I think they were quite effective. Um, I asked questions that allowed the client to see all sides of the problem. I didn't just ask questions that made him see the bad side of selling drugs. I asked him questions like, what's appealing about it? And I think that kind of threw him for a loop when I asked him what's appealing about selling drugs, because he's probably thinking, this behavior is supposed to be bad, but you're asking me what's good about it. But I know that we do that. So to get clients thinking, we don't want to be leading. And sometimes if you ask all negative questions, that can be leading to the client, making them feel like, okay, this behavior is bad. She really wants me to change. So asking questions like, what's good about it? Makes them think, is it what's good about it? Does it outweigh what's bad about it? It allows the client to weigh that within themselves. Um, and overall, I think I did pretty good. I do. I know that this is something new for me, but I know with practice and growth that I can be more effective in using motivational interviewing and enhancement therapy. And I really enjoyed this assignment. And that's it. Bye.